Ambassador Mina Kim stood quietly at the edge of the wide observation deck aboard Harmony Station, watching the stars drift silently across the void. The Earth glowed far in the distance, blue, green, alive, suspended in the dark like a memory. She adjusted her uniform, the navy blue coat, crisp and sharply cut, silver piping, catching the station's soft lighting. It wasn't just ceremonial, it marked her as Earth's voice to the Galactic Council. The calm hum of the station was interrupted by a soft chime from her AI companion, Jin, a small, hovering sphere of blue light that floated nearby like a patient assistant. "Ambassador, priority transmission from the Galactic Council," Jin said, its voice neutral, calm. Kim exhaled slowly, lips pressing into a line. "Put it through." The large display on the far wall flickered to life. A second later, the screen was filled by the towering, rigid figure of Supreme Commander Krau of the Techran Dominion. His insectoid form glistened beneath the council chamber lights, the sharp chitin of his exoskeleton polished to a mirror-like sheen. 4 compound eyes locked onto her, unreadable. His mandibles clicked softly, then more loudly, a language filled with coded aggression. The translation system overlaid a calm voice. "There is no honor here, human. I am not here for diplomacy. I speak only to inform you. The 3,000-year peace between our species has ended." Kim's expression didn't falter. She kept her diplomatic smile in place, though her fingers curled ever so slightly against the warm ceramic of her coffee mug. This moment had been expected, not hoped for, but prepared for. "I see," she said, not yet reacting. Krau's mandibles widened, a Techran gesture of dominance. "Your primitive species has expanded beyond what the Treaty of Proxima allows. Colonizing the Epsilon sector was a direct violation. Your refusal to recognize Techran superiority cannot go unanswered. Prepare for annihilation." Behind him, Kim could see the faces or facsimiles of other council representatives. The Vex ambassador, a crystalline being, gave the equivalent of a shrug, its internal glow pulsing faintly in apology. Others shifted uncomfortably. Not one voiced support. Kim took a slow sip from her mug. The deliberate motion made Krau's upper limbs twitch. She saw it and smiled. "Does the council support this declaration?" she asked, calm as ever. Krau made a dismissive motion with one claw. "The council has been informed. This is no longer a matter of council governance. This is between us." That was the confirmation she needed. Kim glanced briefly at Jin. The little orb pulsed once, silently acknowledging it was recording, analyzing, and transmitting every word, every expression, every flicker of movement. For 3 millennia, humanity had played a long game, one of patience, concealment, and relentless preparation. The Techran had never believed humans were a true threat. Insectoid arrogance, reinforced by rigid hierarchy and centuries of unchallenged dominance, had convinced them of their own invincibility. To them, humans were curious, even clever, occasionally useful allies, occasionally inconvenient meddlers, but never equals, never rivals. And that belief had just become their most dangerous weakness. Krau leaned forward on the screen, his patience slipping. "Your response, Ambassador?" Jin's voice sounded softly into Kim's earpiece. "Would you like me to issue the standard diplomatic rejection?" Kim tilted her head slightly. Her smile deepened. "No," she replied, aloud now, clearly and firmly for all present in the chamber to hear. "Tell them we accept." There was a visible reaction: blinks, tremors, shifts of light and limb from across the screen. Even Krau's gleaming form froze for a half-second, his mandibles clicking in what might have been surprise. "You accept?" he repeated. "Yes," Kim said, placing her coffee mug carefully down onto the small table beside her. "Humanity accepts your declaration of war." There was no tremble in her voice, no pause, no fear. Just a quiet certainty. Behind her, Harmony Station's central systems began activating hidden protocol. Code: Kim 7 Delta Omega. Across the stars, countless human-built systems, some known, most hidden, came online. She watched Krau through the screen. watched his posture stiffen further, watched as uncertainty crept into the spaces between his words and movements. "You will regret this arrogance," he hissed. "Perhaps," Kim said, then gave a slight bow, "but I doubt it." With that, she signaled to Jin, and the transmission ended. The screen faded to black. Kim turned back toward the stars. She picked up her mug again, the warmth of the ceramic grounding her. Out there, beyond the viewports, a great fleet was no doubt already in motion. Thousands of ships, weapons drawn. Confidence high. She sipped her coffee and said quietly to the vastness, "And so it begins." For generations, humanity had worn a mat. To the rest of the galaxy, they had presented themselves as a moderately advanced species, bright, inventive, adaptable, but ultimately limited. Their ships were functional but unremarkable. Their colonies were expanding, yes, but always within expected patterns. Their scientists contributed to galactic research, their diplomats showed up on time, and their military remained modest, even outdated by most standards. It was all intentional. From the first contact over 3,000 years ago, humanity had made a choice. Instead of racing to compete with the dominant empires of the stars, they had pulled back, taken a deep breath, and set their own course. They watched, they learned, and above all, they planned. Now, the mask was coming up. Protocol Pandora had been activated. From Mars to Europa, from the outer asteroid colonies to deep space science installations hidden inside artificial comets, the message was the same. Protocol Pandora active. Stay calm, continue normal activity. And that's exactly what people did. On Earth, street vendors kept flipping dumplings on griddles. Subway trains arrived on time. Kids went to school. At the University of New Oxford, a physics professor looked up from her lecture and said, "It appears our discussion on quantum temporal shear will be practical sooner than expected." Her class burst into laughter, not from fear, but from recognition. They'd been waiting for this. Humanity had not been idle during its modest development. Beneath the surface of public progress, another world existed. Entire cities had been built underground, cloaked in quantum fields, unreachable by even the most advanced alien sensors. Military fleets had been hidden inside artificial black holes, frozen in temporal suspension. Technologies that defied known physics had not only been theorized, they had been tested, perfected, and deployed. The Techran Dominion, like so many others, had never suspected a thing. To the insectoid Techran and their rigid caste structure, humans were small, soft, and chaotic. They respected order, hierarchy, dominance. Their analysts had dismissed humanity's lack of aggression as weakness. Their strategists believed human military capacity was little more than defensive formality. They believed that once the peace was broken, humanity would beg for mercy. They had no idea. Even now, as the Techran fleet surged toward Earth in a massive show of force, they believed they were launching a decisive, overwhelming first strike. They had seen Earth's orbital defenses, just a handful of outdated platforms in geosynchronous orbit. They had detected a few human warships, relics compared to their own sleek armadas. They saw no sign of resistance, no power surges, no weapon systems activating. It confirmed everything they believed. Humans were unprepared, vulnerable. What they didn't see was the trap. What they didn't understand was that every visible weakness was a performance, a costume, worn with practiced precision. In hidden chambers, beneath the surface of Luna Earth's moon, massive machines stirred to life. These weren't just weapons, they were systems built to manipulate spacetime, to shape the very laws of reality around them. The Techran had theories about such things, wild, abstract musings from their fringe scientists, but to the humans, this was old technology. Stable, reliable. The Earth itself was no longer in its original orbit. It had been relocated, moved into a pocket dimension only accessible through precise gravitic folding. The operation had taken centuries to plan, a full decade to execute, and was completed over 500 years ago. The entire solar system had been reinforced. every planetary body layered with invisible constructs of impossible scale. Humanity had not just hidden, it had transformed. And now, as the Tekran threatened war, the illusion was being dropped, piece by piece. Inside Tekran warships, as they approached Earth's former location, officers reported anomalies, time behaving strangely, sensors feeding contradictory data. Soon, Earth was simply gone. Not cloaked, not hidden, absent. And then the message appeared. A human woman, rendered in flawless holographic precision, standing on the bridge of their flagship, smiling calmly. Her words were simple. "We've been expecting you." The reaction on board Tekran vessels was confusion first, then disbelief, then something else, something ancient and unfamiliar. Fear. The woman, Commander Song of Earth Defense, spoke without threat or bluster. She explained that the Tekran fleet had been caught in a time dilation field. 3 seconds had passed for the galaxy, hours for them. She revealed that small scanning devices had already mapped every inch of their ships, bypassing every defense without resistance. She confirmed that their weapons were now inert, their systems exposed, their advantage nullified. And still, she offered peace. The real shock wasn't what humanity could do. It was how calmly they chose not to do it. That restraint, more than the time fields, the pocket dimensions, or the nanotech woven silently into Tekran bloodstreams, was what shattered the illusion. Humanity wasn't dangerous because of its power. It was dangerous because it had power, and it had chosen not to use it until now. The mask had fallen. The game had changed. And somewhere deep inside the great Tekran war machine, a single thought echoed louder than any alarm. They were never what we thought they were. The Tekran fleet emerged from hyperspace like a steel tide, shimmering with the dull gleam of living metal. 1,000 ships strong, they spread into a precise battle formation at the outer edge of the Sol system. It was the largest military operation launched by the Tekran Dominion in 5 centuries, an overwhelming force meant to end a war before it could truly begin. Admiral Mach, tall even by Tekran standards, stood at the center of the flagship's command bridge. His carapace bore the golden markings of a decorated war commander, and his 4 compound eyes scanned the display as his subordinates scurried to their posts. "Status report," he ordered. His voice low and clipped, mandibles clicking with quiet confidence. "Fleet has arrived intact, Admiral," his second-in-command replied. "All ships are operational. Human orbital defenses detected, but they appear inactive. No significant movement. Just a few old military vessels near the 4th planet, Earth." Mach focused on the tactical hologram. Earth should have been directly ahead. A blue-green orb turning slowly on its axis, its moon circling faithfully. A symbol of everything the Tekran saw as weakness: soft ecosystems, scattered colonies, and a species that had never truly embraced war. But something was wrong. "Sensors sweep," Mach said sharply. "Why is the planet not on screen?" "Running diagnostics now," came the response from the sensor officer. His antennae twitched with unease. "Admiral, I'm reading anomalous data from orbital position 3. The moon is present, but what?" Mach snapped. "There's no Earth, sir," the officer said. "The planet is gone." Silence swept the bridge. "Check your instruments again," Mach demanded. "A planet doesn't just disappear." "All systems are functioning normally, Admiral. No gravitational signature, no electromagnetic readings, nothing." "The moon is orbiting." "Nothing." Mach's feet clicked sharply across the polished floor as he approached the main view screen. He stared into the void where Earth should have been. The moon hovered in its place, slowly rotating, casting shadows over an empty quadrant of space. "Impossible," Mach muttered. "They couldn't have hidden a planet." His science officer spoke up, working feverishly at a glowing console. "If it's cloaked, it's unlike anything we've ever encountered. There's no interference pattern, no gravitational distortion. It's as if the planet never existed." Before Mach could issue another order, the lights on the bridge dimmed, and every console began flashing in sync. A new signal was coming in, undeniably human. A swirl of light formed in the center of the bridge, expanding into the image of a human woman in dark uniform. She wasn't a standard hologram. She was detailed, too detailed. Her eyes, her clothing, even the faint rise and fall of her breath were indistinguishable from a real person. She smiled as if greeting colleagues, not enemies. "Welcome to Seoul," she said warmly. "I see you're looking for Earth. I'm afraid we moved it." Mock stiffened. "You moved a planet?" The woman nodded politely. "Just a precaution. We've been expecting your arrival for some time." Her tone was light, almost conversational. It made Mock's mandibles click with frustration. "I am Admiral Mock of the Techran Dominion. Produce your planet and surrender, or face the consequences." "My name is Commander Song, Earth Defense Force," she replied calmly. "And no, we won't be surrendering." She gestured to the view beyond the bridge. "Your fleet is currently suspended in a time dilation field. From your perspective, this conversation is happening in real time. From the galaxy's perspective, 3 seconds have passed since your arrival." Mock felt a strange chill settle over his thorax. That would explain the frozen stars outside, the suspended debris, the lack of movement in space. His instincts screamed denial, but the readings confirmed it. "This violates every known law of physics," he said. Song tilted her head. "According to whose physics, Admiral? Yours?" A junior officer approached Mock, his movements sluggish and uncertain. "Admiral, our sensors confirm her claims. And more small foreign devices have appeared across the ship. We can't remove them. We can't even touch them. They're just observers," Song said. "Medical nanobot. They've been mapping your biology since you arrived." Mock's claws tightened on the railing. "You infected us?" "No," Song said gently. "You entered the field voluntarily. It's a passive scan, nothing harmful. We don't attack first, Admiral." He opened his mouth to issue a retort, but froze as another alarm chimed. His tactical officer shouted, "Admiral, massive energy buildup on the moon. The surface is opening." The view screen shifted to show Earth's moon shedding its disguise. Beneath its gray surface, lights flared, structures moved. A vast defensive platform stirred to life. Cannons the size of skyscrapers rotated into position, and a deep hum of raw power filled the air. "One of our older systems," Song said casually. "We kept it around, just in case." The bridge filled with an eerie stillness. No one moved, no one spoke. Then Song's voice returned, now firm, controlled. "You came looking for weakness, but you found preparation. You found restraint. We moved our home to protect it, but we didn't move our reach." She stepped closer, almost face to face with Mock. "Go home, Admiral. Tell your leaders what you saw. Tell them Earth is still here, just not where you expected it." And with that, she vanished. Mock stood motionless on the bridge, staring into empty space. The moon loomed ahead, now very much alive. Earth was gone but not lost. And for the first time in his long military career, Mock didn't feel victorious. He felt very, very small. Admiral Mock stood rigidly at the center of the flagship's command bridge, still reeling from the impossible. Earth was gone. Not hidden, not defended, gone. His science teams had scoured every frequency, gravitational distortion, and energy signature, yet came back with the same answer. The planet was simply no longer in normal space. Then came the second impossibility. Without warning, a soft pulse of light shimmered in the air before him, just above the tactical console. The bridge crew froze. Their weapon systems were still non-functional. Their sensors were still in chaos. Yet somehow, someone or something was projecting a live holographic image directly onto the flagship. And not just any image. A human woman stood before them. No grainy scan, no flickering projection. This was a level of detail no Techran technology could replicate. Her every movement flowed naturally, from the shifting of her dark uniform to the subtle rise and fall of her breath. She could have stepped off an actual human ship, if such a ship could even reach this level of precision. She looked around the bridge with calm curiosity, like a teacher observing a classroom. Then she smiled, a small, knowing smile that made every Techran officer on the bridge tense. "Greetings," she said clearly. "I'm Commander Song of Earth Defense." Mock's mandibles clicked in confusion. "What trick is this?" "No trick," Song replied, hands behind her back. "Just an update. You're currently inside our gravitic fold network. Time is slower for you now. While this conversation's happening in real time for us, only 3 seconds have passed outside the field." Mock felt his core temperature drop slightly. He glanced at his science officer, who nodded silently, antennae twitching. "It checks out," the officer muttered. "We're suspended. Everything outside, light, radiation, even passing debris, is frozen. This violates every known physical constant," Mock said flatly. Song gave a small shrug. "Only the ones you know." Before Mock could respond, another officer reported new readings. Tiny foreign devices were appearing throughout the ship, inside consoles, ventilation shafts, even on their bodies. They moved silently, scanning everything. "We're being invaded," someone shouted. "These are probes. They're nanobots," Song said, cutting through the panic. "Medical grade. Completely passive. We're just observing. You're not in danger." Mock's patience snapped. "This is aggression, a violation of sovereignty. I demand you cease these actions at once and return our people's autonomy." Commander Song didn't flinch. "If we wanted to take your autonomy, Admiral, you'd already be dead. Every one of you. You came here to threaten us. We chose not to respond in kind. That is restraint, not weakness." "Why not strike first?" Mock asked, voice rising. "Why the games? Why let us get this far?" Her eyes held his for a long moment. "Because we don't want war. And because this isn't a game, it's a message." As if on cue, the moon outside their viewport changed. Its familiar pockmarked surface began to shift, panels sliding open, lights glowing beneath its skin. Towers rose from hidden bays, massive cannons rotated into place, and a low hum of dormant systems now alive filled the sensors with unreadable energy signatures. "That," Song said, gesturing casually, "is our lunar defense platform. One of the oldest. We keep it as backup. It's more than enough for this situation." A collective silence fell across the bridge. Even Mock couldn't deny what he was seeing. He could feel it in the air, taste it in the electrical pulses brushing his antennae power beyond comprehension. "What is this?" he asked, quieter now. "This is what we've built while you watched our surface-level progress," Song replied. "You saw slow development, measured advancement. We let you believe we were behind. It was never deception. It was patience." The truth sank in like a cold tide. Humanity had never been weak. They had never been behind. They had simply chosen not to reveal what they were capable of until now. Mock took a step forward. "You've shown us power, fine, but what do you want?" "To end this before it begins," Song said. "Return to your space. Tell your leadership what you've seen, that Earth has changed. That humanity is not the species you believed us to be." "And if we refuse?" Mock asked, though the question felt hollow even as he spoke it. "Then we'll defend ourselves," she said simply. "We won't strike first, but we won't fall." The image of Song blinked out, leaving only the glowing consoles and the trembling stillness of the Techran crew. Mock stood in place, mandibles tight, mind reeling. He had come expecting a show of desperation. He had found calm power. He had brought war to what he thought was prey, only to discover a predator far older, far wiser, and far more prepared than anything his empire had ever faced. And now, every officer on the bridge shared the same thought, unspoken but heavy in the air. This war is already lost. The Techran fleet remained motionless in the void, 1,000 warships suspended between confusion and fear. Admiral Mock had ordered a full halt after the encounter with the human hologram. No further action, no further movement. The time dilation field had deactivated, returning them to normal space, but nothing felt normal anymore. In his private chamber aboard the command ship, Mock sat hunched over a console. surrounded by floating screens displaying human data files that had been silently uploaded into their systems during the encounter. He hadn't authorized it, no one had, and yet the data was there, neatly organized, waiting to be read. He had expected propaganda. What he found was something else entirely. Weapons footage played silently on one display, a small human ship absorbing a blast from a Techran-level antimatter cannon. By all laws of physics, the ship should have been vaporized. Instead, the energy simply disappeared into its hull, absorbed, processed, neutralized. The vessel's surface shimmered briefly, then returned to normal as if nothing had happened. Mock's mandibles clicked softly in disbelief. Another file detailed their defensive technology. Not shields in the traditional sense, no energy barriers or magnetic fields, but spatial folding. Incoming projectiles or energy beams didn't impact anything. They just vanished, redirected through tiers in space, dumped who knew where. Some returned through separate folds hours later, miles away, deactivated. It was beyond theoretical. It was impossible, and yet it was real. He pulled up a schematic of their communication system. The humans had built a network based on quantum entanglement, instantaneous data transmission across any distance, with zero delay and zero possibility of interception. Techran communication systems, once considered the pinnacle of secure military technology, now looked like toys by comparison. But the real shock came with the energy file. Dyson swarms. Massive rings and webs of satellites orbiting multiple stars in hidden systems, harvesting their energy, storing it, and transferring it through quantum relays. The total output dwarfed the entire Techran Dominion's energy grid. It wasn't just overkill. It was a display of capacity the Techran couldn't even begin to match. His sub-commander entered without ceremony, clearly shaken. "Admiral," he said, "the crew is unsettled. Many have seen the files. The commanders are demanding direction." Mock didn't answer immediately. He brought up another scan on one of the floating screens, one that showed biological data from the ship's officers, including himself. Tiny machines moved through their systems. Non-native, unregistered, unstoppable. "Show me your arm," Mock said quietly. Confused, the sub-commander extended his upper right limb. Mock tapped a control. One of the floating scanning devices left behind by the humans activated and passed over the limb. A detailed internal image appeared. Veins, tissue, and thousands of tiny machines, nanobots moving inside. "What is this?" the sub-commander asked, voice rising. "Medical nanobots," Mock replied flatly. "They were introduced into our bodies when we entered the time dilation field. Harmless for now. They're just mapping our biology." "They're inside all of us?" "Yes." Mock paused, then showed a matching scan of a human subject, similar nanobots, more integrated. "They've had this for centuries. These machines repair their bodies at the cellular level. They don't age the way we do. They don't get sick. They've eradicated disease from their species." The sub-commander took a step back. His antennae drooped. This isn't war," he said. "This is a lesson." Before Mock could respond, the chamber lights dimmed. Another incoming transmission. The display shifted to a single unified feed. An older human male appeared on the screen, seated calmly. Gray-haired, weathered, composed. "Admiral Mock," the man said. "I am Park Human Defense Coordinator. I trust you've had time to review what we've shared." Mock straightened. He tried to hold on to what pride he had left. "Some of what we've seen defies understanding." "That's fair," Park nodded, "and likely intentional. But I assure you, if anything, we've downplayed our capabilities." "Why now?" Mock asked. "Why show us this after centuries of pretense?" Park leaned slightly forward. "Because we never wanted this moment. For 3,000 years we've watched, waited, and prepared. Not to conquer, but to ensure we're never caught off guard again." He tapped a control. The screen shifted again, now displaying a massive structure in space. It took Mock a moment to recognize it. Earth, surrounded by a lattice of interconnected platforms, orbitals, and defense nodes. a planetary defense grid operating in a pocket dimension adjacent to standard space. This is Earth's current position, Park said. Fully mobile, fully defended. What you see is technology we developed over 1,000 years ago. The image zoomed out, showing similar structures around other planets in the system. Humanity hadn't just hidden, they had fortified their entire solar system with technology so advanced, no existing galactic power could rival it. Mock felt something in his chest that wasn't anger or pride. It was fear. "What do you want from us?" he asked quietly. "Nothing you don't offer freely," Park said. "We still want peace, trade, shared knowledge, mutual respect. But if you bring war again," his voice grew firmer, "we won't run, and we won't hold back." The transmission ended. Silence fell. Mock stood motionless, surrounded by impossible data, impossible truths, and one unavoidable conclusion. They had already won. Long ago, without firing a shot. The doors of the Techran High Command slammed shut behind Admiral Mock. Guards flanked him as he stood alone in the center of the grand chamber, a space lined with towering armored figures whose shells gleamed with rank and reputation. Their compound eyes glinted with fury. The shame of retreat burned across the room like plasma. Mock stood tall, his mandibles set. He had delivered his report, every word, every file, every recording provided by the humans. He had explained the loss of Earth, the time field, the nanotechnology inside their bodies, the lunar weapons platform, and the unimaginable systems that powered it all. He had laid out the facts, and no one wanted to hear them. "Deception," Supreme Commander Vec hissed, slamming his clawed limb onto the table. "A display of illusions designed to humiliate us. You believe these tricks over the might of the Dominion?" Mock didn't flinch. "I saw them with my own eyes, Commander. Their technology is not illusion, it's preparation. Precision. Power used with discipline." "You sound like a coward," another general growled. "No," Mock replied. "I sound like someone who survived." He looked around the chamber. Not one face showed understanding. They weren't ready. Not for what he had seen. Not for what humanity had become. "The humans returned our fleet intact," Mock said. "They offered us peace. They could have destroyed us without a single loss on their side, and they didn't." Vec rose to his full height, towering over the room. "Enough. You are relieved of command, pending investigation for possible human influence." The words echoed through the chamber. Mock didn't resist. He knew the decision had already been made. This wasn't about logic. It was about pride. Vec turned to the other commanders. "We proceed as planned. The first strike fleet will attack the human mining colony in the ETCA system, a minor settlement, minimal defenses, a show of force. They will learn that the Techran do not retreat." Mock was escorted out, his steps slow, his thorax tight with dread. He said nothing. There was nothing more to say. They hadn't just dismissed, they had signed their own death warrant. New Haven was a quiet colony. Built into the rocky surface of TA's second moon, it housed just over 20,000 human settlers. Miners, engineers, families. Children played in atmospheric domes. Merchants sold fresh vegetables from hydroponic farms. Technicians repaired aging machines in dusty corridors beneath the surface. It was not a place of war. Sun, a maintenance tech in his 30s, climbed out of an access tunnel, wiping sweat from his brow. His wrist console pinged a message from his wife. "Dinner at the Garden Dome with Han and you, 19. Don't forget." He smiled and sent back a quick reply. Then a second notification appeared. "Protocol Pandora. Level 2 activation. Continue normal activities." He paused, looked around. Other workers had received it too. Some nodded, one chuckled. No one panicked, no sirens blared, no alarms screamed, just quiet awareness. They knew what it meant. Across New Haven, operations continued. Children went to school, traders opened shop, engineers returned to their panels. Calm, ready. Far above, the Techran First Strike Fleet entered orbit. Over 3,000 warships, Millions of soldiers, weapons charged, engines primed. Fleet Commander Zack stood proudly on his bridge, mandibles clicking with satisfaction. Scan complete, his officer reported. Minimal orbital defenses. No active fleet presence. Civilian population detected. Vulnerable. Begin the attack, Zack said. Wipe out their defense grid, then level the settlement. Weapons officers moved fast. Cannons charged. Missile bays opened. Lock on systems engaged. Fire, Zack ordered. In an instant, energy blasts lit up the void. Tens of thousands of coordinated shots streaked toward the planet. Then everything stopped, literally. The energy beams froze in space, mid-air, hanging like glowing threads. Missiles halted mid-flight. On every Techran ship, officers stood frozen, bodies locked, eyes blinking, hearts pounding. Conscious, but unable to move. Time itself had stopped for them. A face appeared on every screen. Human, female. Commander Lee. Her expression was calm, patient, disappointed. "Greetings," she said. "You were warned," Admiral Mock tried to explain. "We gave you evidence. We offered peace." Zack's mandibles twitched, but he couldn't speak. Lee looked down, scanning something. "You brought 3,027 ships, 6 million military personnel. Your target? A colony of 20,000? 6,000 of them children." She looked back up, her voice sharp, unacceptable. Then, without moving, she reached her hand through the screen. Every ship shook. Systems failed. Alarms triggered. Weapon cores imploded silently. Cannons vanished. Missiles blinked out of existence. Not damaged, gone. Disassembled at the molecular level. Erased. Lee pulled her hand back. "Your life support remains intact. Your engines are still operational. You're free to leave." Time resumed. Officers stumbled, gasped. Zack stared at his console. His fleet, once unstoppable, was now disarmed. Utterly. Lee's face returned. "This was the smallest demonstration we could offer," she said. "Our warships were here the moment you arrived. They chose not to engage. Our people below never stopped working. They never even looked at..." She leaned in slightly. "Because they don't fear you. And now, neither should we." The feed cut. Silence returned. Zack stood trembling at the edge of his command deck. "Set course for home," he said quietly. "We're done here." The Techran First Strike Fleet was the pride of their empire. 3,000 state-of-the-art warships, each one a masterpiece of engineering, carrying millions of battle-hardened soldiers and enough firepower to turn a planet into dust. And now, they floated in silence. The attack on New Haven had not gone as expected. Commander Zack stood rigid at the center of his ship's bridge, eyes locked on the tactical display that now showed nothing. No weapons, no targets, no status indicators. All offensive systems were gone, not disabled, not damaged. "Gone." "What do you mean, gone?" he barked. His weapons officer, still shaken from the experience, barely raised his voice. "Sir, the systems are offline. They've been physically erased. The missile bays are empty. The cannon arrays? Aren't there any more?" Zack shoved past him and stared at the readings himself. The screens didn't lie. Scans showed the internal ship structure intact except where the weapons systems had been. In those places, there was just open air, smooth metal, as if nothing had ever been installed. On screen, the image of Commander Lee had just vanished. Her voice still echoed in his mind. "You're now unable to attack, but fully able to return home." He clenched his jaw. They'd been humiliated without a single shot fired. No resistance, no counterattack. Just complete disarmament executed with precision beyond understanding. He had thought the freezing of time was the worst of it. When the missiles had stopped in mid-flight and energy beams had frozen in space like glowing spears suspended in glass, he'd assumed it was a bluff, some kind of psychological tactic. But when time restarted and their weapons disappeared, he understood. This wasn't a trick. This was control. Full spectrum, no loophole, beyond theoretical control. And worst of all, the humans had warned them. Zach's mandibles clicked unconsciously as he turned toward the rest of his bridge crew. They looked stunned, ashamed, afraid. Not one of them had moved since the feed ended. Not one dared speak. They had been warriors, elite forces of the Dominion. Now they were little more than passengers on powerless vessels, surrounded by invisible human ships that had been there the entire time. Ships that hadn't moved, ships that hadn't fired, ships that hadn't needed to. Far below, on the surface of New Haven, the people never stopped working. Shin wiped his hands on a rag as he closed up the maintenance panel on an atmospheric filter. His wrist console buzzed again, another reminder about dinner with Han and you. He smiled. A few feet away, a group of children kicked a ball inside one of the sealed recreation domes. Parents sat nearby chatting. A teacher strolled by, sipping tea from a steaming cup, glancing up at the sky through the transparent dome. The stars above twinkled peacefully. There was no sign of the battle that had almost occurred, because it never really began. Protocol Pandora had done its job. No alarms. No evacuations. No panic. The message had been simple. Continue normal activities. And people had, because they trusted the system. Because they knew what it meant. Humanity had waited 3,000 years for this 3,000 years of planning, of hiding true capabilities, of preparing for the moment when someone, somewhere, would test the assumption that humans were weak. That moment had arrived, and it had passed. On board the Techran flagship, Zach sat quietly in his command chair, staring out into the stars. "I don't understand," one of his junior officers finally said, voice low. "Why didn't they just destroy us?" Zach didn't answer right away. He looked around the bridge at his people, then back at the empty space ahead, the place where missiles had once launched, where war had once seemed inevitable. "They didn't want to," he said at last. "They didn't need to." The junior officer frowned. "But why let us get so close? Why not stop us before we fired?" Zach turned slowly toward him. "Because they needed us to see it, to understand, to carry the message ourselves." The realization settled over the crew like a heavy fog. This wasn't just a defeat. It was a demonstration. A deliberate, orchestrated show of restraint so powerful, it made their entire doctrine of conquest look childish. "They're not warriors," another officer said bitterly. "No," Zach replied. "There's something else entirely." He tapped a control on his chair, signaled the fleet. "Set course for Techran Prime, immediate withdrawal." There was no argument, no protest. Just quiet compliance. As the first ships began to turn away from New Haven, the sensor officer let out a soft gasp. "Sir, the human ships, they're moving." Zach looked up. The sleek, alien silhouettes previously undetectable were now drifting into view. They were unlike anything the Dominion had ever seen. Smooth, silent, almost organic in design. Not a single one had revealed a weapon. Not one emitted a threatening signal. Yet every single person on board knew they could have been destroyed in seconds. The humans weren't chasing them. They were escorting them out. A final gesture, a warning, a mercy. Far below, Shin packed up his tools and glanced skyward one more time. The stars looked the same, but everything had changed. He checked his console, another message from his wife. "Don't forget dessert." He smiled. War had come and gone, and still, life went on. The neutral space station Harmony Point floated in the quiet void between stars, silent, enormous, and old. Built 1,000 years ago by the Vandari, a pacifist species known for their architecture and diplomacy, it had seen countless peace treaties negotiated, alliances formed, and empires humbled, but never anything like this. Representatives from 27 galactic civilizations filled the grand chamber. The room was massive, domed, and lined with holographic starlight, designed to evoke openness and unity. But today, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The recent events surrounding humanity had shaken the foundations of everything the galaxy thought it understood. Supreme Commander Vec of the Tekran Dominion sat stiffly in his designated seat. His massive insected frame was tense, his mandibles tight with frustration and humiliation. Beside him stood Admiral Muck, freshly reinstated after the fleet he had once commanded was returned intact, disarmed, yes, but unharmed. Many still didn't know what to make of that. "The humans have not yet arrived," the Vandari moderator announced, her melodic voice echoing through the chamber. "They have requested to send a single representative." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The Drev ambassador, a being of living flame, flickered more intensely in agitation. One representative? After neutralizing an entire armada? This is arrogance. "It is practicality," countered the Long Counselor, a six-eyed being of silver fur. "If they wished to destroy us, they wouldn't need to send anyone at all." The words settled heavily across the room. There was no arguing the facts anymore. Reports had poured in over the past 3 days, verified transmissions, sensor data, internal logs, all pointing to a single conclusion. Humanity had achieved technological dominance on a scale previously thought impossible. They had moved their planet. They had stopped time. They had dismantled an entire fleet without causing a single injury. And then they had offered peace. The massive chamber doors slid open. All eyes turned. No armed guards, no towering enhanced warrior, no imposing machine. Just one human, an elderly man, slightly hunched with white hair and a wooden cane, walked slowly into the room. He wore no armor, no insignia, no obvious technology. His clothing was plain dark, simple, functional. He moved at a deliberate pace, unbothered by the eyes watching his every step. When he reached the center of the circular chamber, he bowed his head politely and settled into the seat reserved for Earth. "Greetings," he said, voice clear but soft. "My name is Choi. I'm a historian and a peace negotiator. I've come to answer your questions and hopefully ease your concerns." The silence that followed was tense. It was the Algary Prime who finally spoke, their crystalline form vibrating with the frequencies that formed their speech. "How can we trust a species with such overwhelming power?" Choi didn't react defensively. He simply nodded. "That's a fair question." He folded his hands on the table before him. "Power alone is not dangerous. Misused power is. Misunderstood power, feared power. We understand this well too well. 3,000 years ago, humanity stood on the brink of extinction. We had turned our weapons inward. Our greatest threat was ourselves." He reached into his pocket and placed a small device on the table. A quiet hum filled the air as it activated, projecting holograms above the center of the chamber, ruins of cities, radiation zones, deserts where oceans once were. "We vowed 2 things," Choi continued. "First, never again would we destroy ourselves. Second, never again would we be defenseless." The images shifted, showing cities rebuilt, technologies restored, peoples reunited. But instead of displaying our strength, we chose to hide it. Not out of deceit, but out of caution. We watched as civilizations rose, some kind, some cruel. We knew if we flaunted our abilities, we'd invite fear, envy, or premature war. Supreme Commander Vec leaned forward. "You pretended to be weak." "We allowed assumptions," Choi said. "There's a difference. We never interfered. We never imposed. But we prepared." He paused, letting the images fade. "The question before us today isn't whether we can overpower you. That question has already been answered. The real question is, what happens now?" A silence followed, one that felt different this time. Less confrontational, more uncertain. "We're offering no demands," Choi continued. "Only invitation." Another hologram appeared, this one of human children playing. Scientists collaborating with non-human researchers, artists painting scenes of alien landscape. "We offer knowledge at a pace you're comfortable with. We offer cultural exchange. We offer trade, travel, and, if desired, collaboration on exploration beyond known space." The Drev ambassador flared briefly. "Why help us in secret? The Vandari plague, the Lumen orbit collapse rumors say you were involved." Choi smiled gently. confirmed, quietly, through intermediaries. Because if we had helped openly, it would have created dependence. Confidence comes from solving problems yourselves. We never wanted worshippers. We wanted equals. He stood slowly, leaning on his cane. You see, the true strength of humanity isn't in our weapons. It's in our perspective, our laughter, our resilience. And right on cue, a soft sound filled the chamber, not from any speaker, but from the very air itself. Laughter, not mocking or sinister, but warm. Human, broadcast from billions of humans across thousands of worlds. Shared, heard, felt. Some representatives shifted, unsure, others smiled. Even Admiral Mook allowed a faint hum of amusement to escape his mandibles. That, Choi said, is what we offer. Not domination, not submission, but a shared future. If you want it. He looked around the room, not with power, but with invitation. And for the first time in a long, long while, the galaxy didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like a beginning. The sound began softly. At first, it was barely noticeable, a gentle, almost imperceptible chuckle that drifted into the interstellar assembly chamber like a breeze through a quiet forest. But then it grew, a ripple of laughter, not canned or artificial, but real. Human, warm, unshaken. It wasn't coming from speakers. It wasn't broadcast through any known system. It simply was, as if the air itself carried it, resonating in every corner of the great chamber aboard Harmony Point Station. 27 galactic species leaders, scientists, generals, diplomats paused in confusion. Some stiffened. Others glanced around, searching for the source. A few instinctively reached for devices, scanning for hidden transmitters, unknown frequencies. They found nothing. And still, the laughter continued, not mocking, not cruel. It was genuine. Supreme Commander Vec of the Tekran Dominion sat frozen, his clawed hands resting tensely on the edge of the table. His mandibles twitched slightly, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Admiral Mock said nothing, but something in his posture had shifted, loosened. Across the table, the Drev ambassador, a being of living flame, flickered with visible confusion. "What is this?" it asked, its voice a low, rhythmic pulse. "Is this another demonstration?" Choi, the lone human representative, remained seated in the center of the chamber, still leaning lightly on his wooden cane. His expression was calm, but his eyes shimmered with quiet amusement. "It's not a show," he said gently. "It's not a weapon. It's not even directed at you." He looked around, meeting the eyes, lenses, sensors, and awareness nodes of each representative. "It's just us." The laughter continued, rising and falling like waves on a distant shore. It carried no aggression, no superiority, only a strange shared understanding. "It began when war was declared," Choi continued. "When our colonies received the Protocol Pandora message, no sirens, no mass evacuations, just a quiet alert. And you know what our people did?" He smiled faintly. They laughed. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. "Why?" asked the crystalline envoy of the Algary. "What could possibly be amusing about a war?" Choi tilted his head thoughtfully. It wasn't the war itself. It was the absurdity of it. The idea that, after everything, after 3,000 years of rebuilding, restraint, preparation, and peace, someone still thought we were vulnerable. He gestured lightly toward the starlit ceiling. Our people laughed in coffee shops on Mars, in lecture halls on Europa, in the domed cities of the Belt, not out of arrogance, not to mock, but because they knew the truth. And they knew that this time, we were ready. He paused, letting the laughter fade to a warm hush in the chamber. "We've spent generations preparing for war we hoped would never come. We didn't flaunt our strength. We didn't build empires. We didn't demand tribute or loyalty. We just waited." The silence that followed was heavy but not uncomfortable, just full, alive with implication. "Our ancestors made a terrible mistake," Choi said. We nearly ended ourselves. From the ashes of that, we made a promise, not just to survive, but to grow wiser. To build a civilization that would never again need to dominate in order to feel secure. He tapped the top of his cane against the floor once softly. You've seen our system. Our defense grid, our ability to manipulate space and time. You've seen ships that don't appear on your sensors, and weapons that leave no trace. But what you haven't seen until now is why we chose not to use them. Vec leaned forward slightly, his voice low. You could have destroyed our fleet. We could, Cho agreed. You could have crippled our empire. We could. Why didn't you? Choi looked at him, not with judgment, but with empathy. Because power without purpose is just noise. And destruction, even when justified, still carries a cost. He gestured gently toward the fading laughter in the air. This is our strength. Not the tech, not the fleets, but our ability to find joy in the face of fear. To laugh, not because we underestimate you, but because we've outgrown the fear of what might come. Across the chamber, representatives shifted, some uncomfortable, others contemplative. Even among the Tekran, whose culture valued order over emotion, a few young aides looked uncertain for the first time. This war doesn't have to continue, Choi said softly. It doesn't have to define our future. You came expecting fear. You were met with calm. You expected chaos. You were met with silence. You expected resistance. And instead, we laughed. He stood slower than he once might, but with a quiet dignity. We offer peace not because we must, but because we still choose to. We offer partnership not because we need allies, but because we still believe in something bigger than fear. The room remained still, the last echoes of laughter dissolving into the vast dome above them like stardust. Your move, he said. And then, without another word, the old man walked out of the chamber, leaving behind only silence and the quiet sense that something irreversible had just changed. The chamber remained still long after the human had gone. Choi's footsteps had faded into the distance, but his words lingered like gravity, unseen, undeniable, shifting everything. Around the massive circular table, representatives of 27 galactic civilizations sat in stunned silence. For a moment, no one knew how to breathe, let alone speak. Supreme Commander Vec stared straight ahead, his massive frame locked in place. The loss of the Tekran First Strike Fleet without a single shot fired still clawed at his pride. The human's message had been clear. We could have destroyed you. We chose not to. And now, they had walked into this sacred chamber of diplomacy, not with demands, not with ultimatums, but with one old man and a cane, and somehow, it was more terrifying than any worship. Admiral Mock sat beside him, his posture more relaxed than before. He had seen it firsthand. He had tried to warn them. And now, sitting silently among the same commanders who had dismissed him, his presence felt heavier than ever. They didn't even bring an escort, the Drev ambassador muttered at last. Just that man. He wasn't just anything, replied the lone counselor, her 6 eyes blinking in perfect sequence. He was more than enough. Around the table, holograms still flickered with human-provided data. Scans of folded dimensions, time dilation fields, the planetary defense grid surrounding the relocated Earth, and the eerie fact that none of it had been presented with aggression, only transparency. The humans had shown just enough. Not too much. Not everything. Just enough to make one thing crystal clear. They were done hiding. And now, the galaxy had to decide how to respond. I don't like this, growled the Run diplomat, a massive creature of plated muscle. They've proven they can end us without effort. That's not peace. That's leverage. Then why didn't they use it? Admiral Mock asked, breaking his long silence. Vec turned to him, his voice sharp. Because they enjoy the game. Psychological warfare. No, Mock said quietly. Because they remember what it means to fall. Because they value what they rebuilt. Because somehow, despite holding every advantage, they still believe peace is the better path. He glanced toward the empty human seat, and because they have nothing left to prove. The Algary Prime, a crystalline being of ancient thought, pulsed softly. So, what now? Do we accept this offer of coexistence? Do we trust them? Choi's voice echoed in Mock's mind, low and measured. We offer peace, not because we must, but because we still choose to. They gave us a choice, Mock said aloud. That's more than most conquerors offer. It's more than we've offered in our own wars. But what if it's a trap? Vec asked bitterly. What if this is all an elaborate stage meant to lull us? Then we prepare, Mock answered, the way we always have. But this time, maybe we also listen. Maybe we learn. No one responded for several seconds. Then, the Vandari moderator, her voice as calm as ever, spoke. We must vote. A soft chime sounded across the chamber. One by one, each representative activated their console. No grand speeches, no dramatic gestures, just decisions made in silence. When the final vote registered, the result appeared above the table in gentle starlight. 23 in favor, 3 abstained, 1 opposed. A moment passed, then another. And finally, the lone counselor spoke, voice steady. Then it is decided. The Interstellar Alliance will formally recognize the human offer of peaceful coexistence and mutual advancement. The words, simple as they were, marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. Outside, in the vast hangars and observation decks of Harmony Point, news spread fast. Not through broadcasts or alerts, but through whispers, through gestures, through the look in someone's eyes when they realized the galaxy had changed. On a nearby observation platform, a young Tekran pilot stood beside a Drev engineer. They had never spoken before, never even made eye contact. Now, they stood in silence, staring out at the stars. Far in the distance, something moved. A single human vessel, graceful, quiet, passed beyond the edge of the station's scanners. It didn't announce itself. It didn't flash lights or play music or demand attention. It just passed, present, peaceful, and utterly unafraid. The Drev turned to the pilot. Do you think they're watching us right now? The Tekran didn't blink. I think they've always been watching and listening, probably. The Drev was quiet for a moment. Then, with a faint flicker of amusement in its ember core, it said, Then, I hope they heard what we decided. The Tekran gave a low click of agreement. Me too. Back in the assembly chamber, the holographic records began saving the moment. The vote, the silence, the flicker of change. It would be studied for generations. Not because it was a surrender, not because it was a treaty, but because it was the moment the galaxy stopped pretending humans were just another species. They weren't the most numerous, they weren't the oldest, they weren't the strongest in the traditional sense, but they were, without question, the most prepared. And finally, they had invited everyone else to rise with them, not through conquest, but through laughter, resilience, and the simple, terrifying power of restraint. A new era had begun, and everyone knew it.